And I want to make a caveat here. It's bad decisions. There's not like they're stupid. That's a different thing, right? I don't want to say like, oh, they didn't know. They didn't know better. That's what. No, they knew. Everybody knew, right? Everybody knew that printing that in the country and based exclusively on oil prices, and also destroy their national oil company, was not good. And then when prices went down, everybody knew that just printing a bunch of money is not going to solve the problem. But it's the only way that they had to keep power, and that's why they did it. That's the very ugly reality, and especially in countries that are not democratic, is that you can't make those choices. I mean, at the end of the day, the latest years of Chavez and Maduro, they decided to create inflation because it was the only way for them to avoid meaningful economic and political reform, and in that way they could keep power. Everybody's income would nosedive, and people will suffer, and inflation will go through the roof, and people will do riots for food.
Americans are capable of achieving extraordinary things when they have the freedom and opportunity to do so. This is American Potential. And here's your host, Jeff Crank.
Thanks for being with us for another episode of American Potential. Appreciate you joining us. We love talking about immigrants who come to the United States because they renew kind of our lifeblood, right? We take it all for granted. America has long been a beacon of hope and opportunity for people from around the world. And today, this is still true as immigrants try to come here for better opportunities. Now, today's guest is one of those people who saw that in his home country of Venezuela, there wasn't a lot of options for him to have a future. And as a teenager, he saw the slow but then rapid growth of hyperinflation and the direct effects it had on his community. Now, because Venezuela's economy was so reliant on oil prices, when the price dropped, it affected the country. But oil prices, they weren't the only factor. When the price dropped, the government kept printing money, which led to hyperinflation. He attended protests because he was concerned about the future. But it wasn't the first time he had been politically active. His family had been involved in politics going back to his great-grandfather. So, as he grew up, he heard his family talking about issues, but now he was seeing the results of those bad government policies. I want to welcome our guest for today, Daniel Contreras, to the podcast. Daniel, thanks for being with us.
Thanks, Jed. Thanks for having me here.
Yeah, so first of all, I understand you're a part of the Dissident Project. Tell me about that.
Yes. So the Dissident Project, we are a group of speakers. We come from all across the world, from countries that are under authoritarian rule, socialist rule. So we have people from Venezuela, people from Cuba, we have people from North Korea who escaped North Korea, amazing stories. And what we do is we talk and tell our stories and the importance of keeping American freedom to high schools across the country. So it's been a wonderful experience. I've been with them for a year.
Well, that's great. I want to know a little bit more about that. Like if folks want to know how to get someone from the Dissident Project to come talk to their school, how would they do that?
Yeah, I mean, just go to a website. You go to a website and you're going to find all of information. You're going to find our email contacts and all the information to book a speech there. And Jeff, I've been able, thanks to the Dissident Project, to travel to a lot of high schools and middle schools across America. And the experience, it's been an amazing experience. It's been an amazing experience to talk to people, not only tell them my stories, but also see their optimism as well. We have a lot of bad news in America. We are inundated, flooded with bad news. But talking to teenagers, talking to people in high school and middle school, and seeing despite all the bad news, still some that inherent hope for America. It's been very, very fulfilling for me.
Yeah. Well, that's great. One of the things I say a lot on this podcast is just how we take it for granted in America because we have freedom and liberty and we really know nothing else. And sometimes that's a bad thing, right? And we need folks like you to remind us of how it is in other countries. And so that's kind of what the Dissident Project is all about, right?
Yeah, that's correct. And to be fair, being not understanding what you have until you lose it, that's extremely common. That happened in Venezuela. It's one of the things that hurts a little bit of Venezuela is that we we were not an authoritarian country until like just 20 years ago. So before that, we were one of the few democracies in the continent, and we lost it because not me, I wasn't born by that time, but my parents' generation, my grandparents, they took it for granted, and they lost it.
Yeah, something that we should all be cognizant of here in the United States. Any generation can lose it for future generations if they aren't careful. We have to protect and defend liberty for sure. So your family owned a business in Venezuela. What was it like for them to operate that business in Venezuela?
Yeah, so my family. Before that, I'm going to tell a little bit of my background a little bit.
Sure,
so my name is Chang Contreras. I want to say the Chang because if not, my dad's going to get mad. So I'll have the two last names, Chang Contreras. Just making that sure because if not, my dad's going to get mad. So my great grandparents, they came from China to Venezuela during the war, Second World War, and they were really hard. And eventually, my granddad, he was able to have a company, a business, basically selling a lot of like industrial refrigeration type of stuff, like for businesses, for restaurants or whatnot. And that's the thing about Venezuela. He prospered before the Chavez regime, and even during the first years when the government hadn't been able to have complete control of the economy, complete control of the country, and the oil barrels was high. It was kind of successful, but the problem with having a business in Venezuela is you can't really plan ahead. You're playing against everybody. You're playing against not only the fact that there's no way to plan ahead. There's a lot of instability. Trying to plan a business with 1,000% inflation a year, I mean, it's very hard to just get the prices stable. Trying to have a business when your employees have to go to, do a line to get some food, and you're going to say yes. So that's also something. And of course, having a business when the government blames the business owner for everything that's going on, from their own mistakes. So it's hard, it's hard. Running a business in general, it's hard, of course, but running a business in a country where you have 1,000%, more than 1,000% inflation, a huge scarcity of basic goods, no public services or very little public services. So like electricity will go off like for 5-6 hours a day in a city that's extremely hot, by the way. So, and when the government actively tries to antagonizes business owners across the country, finding ways to punish them, finding petty reasons to close, suspend, or fine businesses just for political reason, just for political gain. That's not easy at all. So of course I was a kid and a teenager. So my parents always tried to keep me and my sister away from it. But I could see the stress. I could see the stress. My parents, their main objective was to be able to get a company to make enough money to pay our employees, to make sure that they would have every 15 and less a month their paycheck. And sometimes that took a lot because in a country with a economic collapse of more than 60-70% of the GDP in less than 3-4 years, plus 9,000% inflation, it's not easy. It's not necessarily easy, but it really took a toll on them. I could see them when they were stressed to just keep the business running, not only for me and to get me and my sister a good life, but also to make sure that they have that money to pay their employees every 15 and less a month, because that was one of the top priorities as well.
Yeah. So as you're telling me this, I'm thinking about our country. And I mean, while we don't have hyperinflation, we've had inflation. Yeah. It's the same cause because there's only one thing that causes inflation, and that's government printing too much money and putting it into the economy. And I mean, what you're talking about, and I'll get to this in a second, what you're talking about is hyperinflation, which is, what we experience here on steroids, much worse. But the other thing that you just mentioned that I think to myself, as you were talking about government coming in and blaming businesses and, finding any reason to either shut them down or regulate them or whatever, our government does that too. and we ought to be very leery of seeing a government, a federal government, or even a state or local government that comes in and does that. Do you see some parallels between some of the things that happened in Venezuela and what may be happening here? Yeah.
I mean, the talking points and the logic the rationale, especially the last 3-4 years when talking about inflation, it's similar. It's pretty much the same logic.
Yeah.
Of course, I always make the caveat because I don't want to be like the guys as well. It's exactly like, because no country is exactly the same at all.
Right.
Every country has its own things, own characteristics, own context, and it's different. But the logic, it's the same. The rationale for saying, well, inflation is because of corporations being greedy, right? That's the talking point for a lot of the last 3-4 years when inflation has gone a little bit, it's gone off the rails. It's the same concept. It's the same concept. It's an absurd one, by the way.
Yeah.
That makes no sense.
Right.
Because it's supply and demand. If you raise the price of something, people are going to be a little bit less likely to buy those stuff. So businesses raise prices because everything that they have, like their cost structures, also raise their prices. So it's just a reflection of the economy, but it's also a very easy win for politicians, right? So it's a very easy punching bag, saying, well, it's not my fault, it's the fault of businesses. And they will not say your small business, they'll say corporation, because that's also easier to market and target politically. But that's not really why it happens. That has nothing to do. It's not like businesses started to want to profit like last year. That's the purpose of a business, to create some profit and keep and grow. But of course, inflation happened the last few years is because the government prints a lot of money, and that's the reason why. But of course, they don't want to keep they don't want to take the accountability out.
Sure.
And that's just. And that happens everywhere. That happens for Venezuelan politicians did it. And of course, they did it in a far worse level because they nationalized businesses. They sometimes put some businessmen, force them either in exile or try to coerce them in one way or the other, and use the entire apparatus of the state to punish businesses very harshly. Of course, the United States is a bit different, but the rationale is the same. And the logic is the same. Is that, well, it's not my fault, it's their fault. And that way, I will not get the flag if I can distract people from the real regional problem.
Yeah. Well, the fact of the matter is politicians are in charge of the government, and they're not in charge of businesses. So it's easier to blame someone else and blame the business for inflation when, you may even know deep down inside you're to blame, but you don't want anybody blaming you. And that's what politicians sometimes do. Talk about hyperinflation, because we've never seen that in the United States. Yeah. We've seen inflation, and Americans are, reacting to that inflation. I mean, we see them being very upset to inflation. But talk about hyperinflation. Like, what happened to the price of eggs or the price of, or a gallon of gas or whatever in Venezuela?
I always use this example. So yes, as I said, the United States has suffered inflation. It's been significant, by the way, very significant. Over the last 3 years. I think the cumulative inflation is 20%. That's a lot.
Yep.
That's a fifth of your income in the last 4 years, decreasing in value. Now, hyperinflation, we're talking about thousands %. I think it's even difficult to even measure how much prices rose, because it's just difficult. There's a point where you cannot even measure it. What happened is, and I always give this example, around 2013, 2012, my family bought an apartment. We saved a lot of money. It's difficult to buy houses in Venezuela. There's not a lot of credit going around with inflation going on. But we were able to buy one. And the price was I would say, I always get this number, I give a range between 5 to 7 million bolivars, right? Bolivars is our coin, national coins, named after Simon Bolivar, the great, it's our version of George Washington, right? And last time I went home, it was a few times, it was a long time. It was 2018. One bottle of Pepsi was 1.5 million bolivars.
Wow.
So, the price of a house could be after less than 5 years, 4 Pepsis.
Wow.
So that's the level. That's when we're talking about hyperinflation, is that what you used to have to buy, the money you used to have to buy a house or an apartment, a car, after a couple of years, and sometimes even less. Sometimes it wasn't even a couple of years. It was like a few months. Was that same amount of money was worth to buy a bottle of Pepsi, right? A bottle of Coke. That's what hyperinflation is.
Yeah.
That's what happens. It's the fact that last year in my high school, none of our students had to, we didn't have cash to pay, because everything was extremely expensive. You would have to have a bag of cash to pay for like an arepa, which is like our national dish, or empanada, or tequeño, which is our national the things that we eat for breakfast. So that you couldn't, of course. Now you say, well, but you don't have, nobody uses cash today. Yeah, but it's not like everybody had debit cards and credit cards in Venezuela back then. So that's what we're talking about when we're talking about hyperinflation. You cannot plan anything. All your savings are wiped. All your when you go and clock in, the moment you clock out, the amount of money you earn is like got evaporated.
Mm-hmm.
You really do need to think on a day to day, and that hurts everybody. Of course, it hurts everybody, but it hurts, of course, the people who has the less. It hurts them the most,
right?
And that's one of the things about inflation. And one of the issues that I always want to talk about is that inflation really hurt the people who have the less the most, and that goes against a little bit of the rhetoric that the government says that they are the government for the people with lower incomes, which is not true. It's not true, because I saw people having to buy less food, having to buy less. I saw my teachers losing weight during my last couple years in high school. And that's what happens when you have hyperinflation. Imagine not being able to, you don't know how a cup of coffee is going to cost you in a couple of days from now. You have no idea.
Yeah.
Imagine that.
Right.
That's insane. That's insane. That's difficult to understand, but that's what happened. That's what happened in Venezuela when hyperinflation hit.
Yeah. Well, and again, we talk about this all the time on this show, but these are bad decisions by government that cause inflation, right? There isn't a cause. They try to blame business, they try to blame everyone else, but ultimately it's the politicians making bad decisions that cause inflation and cause this despair and hurt in the lives of families in Venezuela.
Yeah, and I want to make a caveat here. It's bad decisions. There's not like they're stupid. That's a different thing.
Right.
I don't want to say like, oh, they didn't know. They didn't know better. That's right. No, they knew. Everybody knew.
Sure.
Right? Everybody knew that printing that in the country and based exclusively on oil prices, and also destroy their national oil company, was not good. And then when prices went down, everybody knew that just printing a bunch of money is not going to solve the problem. But it's the only way that they had to keep power, and that's why they did it. That's the very ugly reality, and especially in countries that are not democratic, is that you can make those choices. I mean, at the end of the day, Maduro and the latest years of Chavez and Maduro, they decided to create inflation because it was the only way for them to avoid meaningful economic and political reform, and in that way they could keep power.
Right.
Yes, everybody would everybody's income would nosedive, and people will suffer, and inflation will go through the roof, and people will do lines for food, but he will stay in power. So that's the only thing that mattered. And that's why I want to say that there were bad decisions, in the sense that for the people were bad decisions, but they're not stupid decisions. They didn't do this because, I didn't know that this is going to happen. They knew. They didn't care.
Yeah. Yeah, right. So let's talk about your family. Now, your family was involved in politics in Venezuela. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so my mom's side of the family, they're very political involved. My great grandparent. So I have two sides of the family. So my dad's side of the family, they came from China. That's why my last name is Chang, right? That's not very. You say, well, that's not very Hispanic, and you'll be right. That's not very Hispanic. They came from China. They escaped, like many people, went to Venezuela during the 50s, 40s, 50s, 60s, and they went there. By mom's side of the family, they've been in Venezuela for a long time, since like Spaniards. And my great-grandfather, he was key political activist in his state, in his town, against our, well, at that time was the last military dictatorship we have. Now we have another one, but that was the almost last military dictatorship we had. And he was a political activist there. He fought for democracy. By that time, it was between 1948 and 1958, Venezuela, we've only had like 2 or 3 years of democratic rule, of elections, actually. We didn't have much of that, like democratic Republican system of government, and he fought for that. He's the secret police of the dictatorship in that time, commanded by a guy who's called Pérez Jiménez, persecuted him a lot. And I remember my grandma telling me the stories when she was a kid, and she had to spy when the political police was coming to her home, so she could run and tell her dad, my great grandparents, so he could run to the woods and hide for 3 or 4 days, so the police didn't catch him. So of course, that since I was a kid, it's was a very important story. My grandparents, they were very involved in politics in the 80s, in like the universities. My grandfather he was a professor, and in that professorial politics in Venezuela was very active. He was very active with it. So because of that, like my grandparents' story, that always moved me to that way. I remember one of the greatest gifts my grandparent, on the mom's side, he gave me was a good portrait of one of the presidents, one of the first democratic presidents of Venezuela we had, and I value that for a long time. And that's why I always thought of democracy as something very close to home, because my grandparents and my great grandparents they did that. They fought for it at the time.
Mm-hmm. Now, yeah, you talked about that. Did it influence you to get involved?
As a citizen, yes. Of course, and it's both. It's the fact that, of course, when I was a little kid, I was hearing those stories. Imagine yourself like a little kid and like 6-7 years old, and your grandma tells your story when she was your age. She was running away from the political police to help her dad.
Right.
That's an amazing story.
Sure.
And when I saw what was happening in the country as well, although I was a kid, it's about you were a kid, but you could see things were changing. You could see things were going the wrong direction. And of course that motivated me, gave me extra motivation to be involved as a citizen in politics. And now everyone was. That's also a thing that I want to say. A lot of people felt compelled to be involved in politics, whether it was in elections or in protests. A lot in 2017, 2014, and 2019. A lot of people went to the streets, and they did it because they rightfully saw that the country was not going in a good direction, and that the only way to be a good citizen was to, reclaim your rights and protest for it. And that's what a lot of people did. And I did it as long as my parents allowed me, because of course I was still 15 years old, 14 years old. And I told my mom, every time I told my mom, I told my dad, hey, I'm going to this massive protest going on. Very dangerous. I'm not saying like, they were like peaceful. They were peaceful on our end, but the government was not peaceful. So yeah. She was not pleased. You can understand that. Yeah. You can understand. It's like, well, my kids, but they went with me. So my dad and my mom, they went with me because they knew that when I told them, yes, but this is my country as well. This is my future as well, and I'm fine for it. And they were like, you're right. And they also went. And like me, all my friends at least went to one or two protests. Mm-hmm. And that's something that is brave, I'll say. A lot of the times to talk about Venezuela, it's just we are in the receiving end. We're just the victims, which it is true. The government did destroy the country. But I also want to highlight the Venezuelan people have fought for a long time. And they did. And regretfully, it hasn't worked, but it was a very important and very, very powerful thing to see hundreds of thousands of people taking a day out of work or school to protest for and risk their lives in many ways, or their freedom to protest for a better future. Yeah.
And it is fascinating. There are people like you at 15 years old who choose, to get involved in that. I was kind of like that, certainly not at 15 going to protests. I didn't need to. I lived in America. I didn't need to go, defend my liberties the way that you did. But I've always been that person that kind of cared about it, thought about liberty, freedom, injustices, things like that. What made you different in your mind from maybe some of the other kids in school? That's not a normal thing for a 15-year-old kid.
Yeah, I'm gonna be honest, right? I'm like you. Since I was a little kid, I was like, one of my favorite TV channels. It was a History Channel back when it was actual History Channel.
Sure,
right. Sure, right. That was one of my favorite shows. So all my friends would either watch, the usual Disney, and I also watched it. It's not like I was only watching, but my History Channel was for me one of my top things. And I'm always being like that, have that vein of like history and politics and of course thinking about liberty, thinking about freedom. And if you combine that, like I would say inherent like taste for it, I always liked it. Since I have a memory, I don't remember a time where I didn't care. With of course what's happening in the country. And what, like the story of my family, I think it's just like a perfect recipe for me being a 15-year-old a little bit annoying sometimes. Political junkie, right?
Right. Now, is there a protest, a specific or particular protest that sticks out in your mind?
I remember a lot of the 2014 protests. So, quick Venezuelan history. So, in 2014, we had one of the first massive protests during the Maduro regime. A lot of people went to the streets, and I remember that the epicenter of those protests was in Plaza de la República, it's kind of like the Republic Plaza, that's the name of it in English, right? And that was the epicenter. Basically, from there, all the people, that's like the center, right? From there. And out of there, we just like took protests across the city. And I remember going there. At that time, the entire city was almost like on a state of siege, basically. Nobody went to work, nobody went to school because everybody was protesting. It was a very chaotic situation. That place was near my home, and I went almost every day there and just be part of the protests. I remember that a lot, going every day, almost every day, one day yes, one day no, depends on having to negotiate with my parents for them allowing me to go there. And I remember I saw such a spirit of what we call spirit de corps, such a community there of people working in every sense. Some people going protest, but the people who couldn't go protest, that they were providing logistics, or providing water, providing food, helping people who were coming from protest, helping people who were affected by tear gas, helping communications among across the many people who were protesting, and it was such a powerful thing. And I remember I saw that, and I was like, they can't beat us. I mean, they can't. I thought that. I was wrong, but it was such a powerful one that really struck me, and that I remember those days as very, very vivid in my mind. That time when we were protesting in 2014 in Plaza República and going around. I mean, sometimes I was able to give a couple speeches when I was a little kid, which was really funny. Everybody was like very old. I was like 14, 15, and screaming and saying, yeah, let's do that. But yeah, that's like the memory I have. It's not a specific day because it was a lot of days, right? It's a lot of protests and a lot of days. But that's one that I really have in mind. That's in the positive side.
Right.
Of course, you have the repression, but I don't want to talk a lot about the repression because there are people who suffer far more than me, and I don't want to
Yeah. Now, were any of your how about your family members? Any of your family members threatened by the government?
Directly, not directly. I will say not directly. Or not that I know. That's a different thing. Maybe it wasn't. My parents never told me, but not directly. But the business was, as any business in Venezuela, constantly under the watch of all the government authorities. A lot of times they close the business because of they found a petty thing, and they just trying to crack down on businesses when the situation was going pretty bad. So that happened a lot. But personally, on my dad and my mom, no, because out of the four, I was the most politically spoken. My dad and my mom, they were involved, but they were more calm. I think that's wise for them. But yeah, so thankfully, my family directly was not threatened.
Yeah. When did you decide to come to America, and what made you decide that was the right thing to do?
Yeah, so I would say among 2015, 2016. So I graduated from high school in 2016. And for a long time, I thought I'm just going to go to, I'm from Maracaibo. This is the second largest city in the country. The best city, if you ask me, and I'm being objective,
right.
It's completely objective in this one. And I wanted to go to probably Caracas and study there, right? It's the capital. But, and I was like, well, I'll probably stay in the country. But then my parents are like, man, you need to go. And at first I was very realistic, very young, well, I'm going to stay. But they're like, no, you need to go. You need to have, we have been worked so hard for so long. We have a chance to get you better education. Well, not better, better education, although I'm not one to talk bad about people who study in Venezuela at all. Good education as well, but better opportunities, better education. And you'll do it. And it for a while I was like, well, I don't know, but the situation was clearly bad. And even if an idealistic 15, 16-year-old Daniel It's like, yeah, situation is pretty bad. I mean, there's no opportunities going around here. And I started applying as everybody. I started studying for the SAT, studying for the TOEFL, which is like the English exam you need to take. And after I graduated high school, it was like a whole year preparing for that, preparing the applications, doing the research. And eventually I was able to come to the United States, to the University of South Florida in Tampa in 2017. So that was a process. It was like of course, my parents took the lead on that one, and I eventually said yes. Well, I really need to go. There's not opportunities in Venezuela, especially at that time, 2017 to 20 until now. But that time was when you could really sense, the how the country went through a clear quickly. The usual saying is, this goes for the majors, the armies collapse slowly and then suddenly.
Mm-hmm.
Well, in the case, I would say the same thing in countries. Countries decay or collapse slowly, then suddenly. And that what happened in Venezuela is at that time in 2017 was the suddenly part.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, when you came to the United States, talk about something that surprised you. I always love this question for, asking somebody who came to the United States. What's the most surprising thing that you encountered when you came to the United States?
How everything worked. I'll say that it sounds like very simple, but to be fair, I had my family. We had traveled to the U.S.
Mm-hmm.
before, so
right.
It's not like the first time I came here. It was like, oh, I didn't know that you have a gazillion flavors of like shit. I knew that. Still surprising. It is. Sometimes it takes. I'm like, now you're used to it, but at times I'm like, wow, this is just. So, but how everything really worked, honestly, how you didn't have to take into account. There are things that you have to take into account when you go in your day-to-day in Venezuela, right? Will there be water at the house? Will there be electricity when I go back? If it goes out, how long will it go out? Will it be a couple hours? Will it be 10, 12 a day, maybe more?
Right.
Those are things that you don't control at all, and you're beholden to those things. Then in the United States, that's not the case. Of course, the electricity goes off, everything like that goes on. You have much more autonomy on what you have to do.
Yeah.
And that sense of empowerment of like, okay, I have like the base level of things that work, get covered. I can do more, but that's on me. Like I can do it, but they give me the chance to do it.
Right.
That sense of empowerment of like, you can succeed. You can find new opportunities, and you don't have to worry of like 1,000% inflation. That's something that I found in the U.S. It's different. It is different. And we were raised like many people in Venezuela. The stories of the United States American dream and land of opportunity. We're very, we know those stories, and I found out that they're true. I mean. Yeah, they're, of course, not like the United States perfect. There's a lot of issues, but like, generally speaking, yeah, they're true. And that's something that stuck with me.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting that you mentioned like water. I do this question a lot when I interview immigrants to the United States. And it's surprising how many people have told me, turning on a faucet and water coming out is something that you take for granted in and
sometimes
countries.
You can drink it. That's insane for me.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
That's still insane. I still can't do it.
Yeah.
I still can't do it. It's 3 days a day. I can't do it. I know that's, you technically do it and you go, and other people do it. I don't feel like, I'm sure about this. I don't know that sure. But yeah, I mean, that was something that's surprising.
Yeah. Right. And all the different bags of chips. Now that's a new
chips,
one too. Yeah. Right.
Yeah, candies.
Yep.
Oh my God, so many candies. I have to control myself because if not, I'll just like so much sugar.
I understand. Oh, okay. Now you went to college. Tell us what you decided to study in college.
What will be no surprise for you? I decided to study political science and economics. It will be a curveball if I told you I decided to study engineering.
Right. Yeah.
But it will be a curveball. Maybe in the next interview I'll just say that and see what people react.
Yeah.
But. Now, I studied political science and economics at USF in Tampa. Great town, great city, and great school.
So let me ask you this. As you were going through college, did you encounter professors who were trying to extol the virtues of a government-controlled economy or socialism?
So it was funny. In I didn't have any professors like that in the economics department. So good props to yourself in this one. My economics professors, they were not like that at all. I mean, I'll say they of course they had to teach you what the Marxist theories, because that's part of your study. You have to do that. But they were also very accurate, very nuanced, and very good. However, in the political side, sometimes you find some professors that were like, a lot of haggling around. But generally speaking, although there were a lot of professors who tried to defend that type of a system, I'll say they were fair. You know, at least at USF, I want to always, I want to be honest and say the truth. That at least my professors were fair. They were fair. They had their ideas, but they didn't, force you to be a communist. Force you to be a socialist. Force you to believe in this. Force you to believe in that. No, they really they knew they had a view, but they did their best to be fair graders, and I value that.
Yeah, when I was in college, I had a history professor, who had a bust of Vladimir Lenin on his desk.
Oh my God!
And
we didn't have that.
he would always extol the virtues of communism. And I remember walking to class one day, and I looked over, and he was driving to his building on campus, and he was driving a Mercedes Benz. And I thought, well, what hypocrisy! And so I went into class and I asked him about it, and he said, "Oh, well, this was back during the Soviet Union days still." And he said, well, in the Soviet Union, everybody could drive a Mercedes Benz. And I said, well, how come they don't? I mean, nobody drives a Mercedes Benz. It's amazing how some people think. But, okay. So even though you came to the United States, you still love the country of Venezuela. Why is that so important to you?
I mean, why do you love your hometown city? I mean, why do you love, that's why do you follow any sports? Yeah. Which one?
Well,
which team are you?
I football, hockey. I mean, I love I hate to say it, even though they are terrible now, my Denver Broncos. I like them. We'll just use that one.
The Broncos, right? So if I ask you, why do you have such a passion for the Broncos, even though they have lost, even though they're losing? Sure. They can't. It's not like a very good. Because I have a paper that tells me that.
Right.
No, it's because I'm from. This because you have that attachment. I was born and raised in Venezuela. It is a significant part of what I am.
Sure.
It was where I have my memories as a kid, as a teenager. Of course, there's some bad memories, but I would say it is still a beautiful country with a lot of kind people. It was just destroyed and looted by very skillful but very evil autocrats, and that's why I still care about that, because you can't really not care about it.
Sure.
Yeah. It is part of you. It is part. I lived there for 18 years. The formative years for me born in Venezuela. There's no way for me to say I don't care about it.
Right.
It's for me. It's just impossible. It's like how you're saying, like for you, let's assume that Broncos not doing well for the next 10 years. It's I'll stop rooting for them.
Right.
No, that's not gonna happen. Right. It's of course, but more intense because you live there. So.
Yeah.
That's why.
And not only would it not happen, it hasn't happened because they haven't been good for 10 years. So anyway, all right. Well, What did I say, Daniel?
Exactly.
So how about your family now? Where's your family?
Well, and that was my other point also why,
right.
Because my family now is all across the world. So thank God, my mom, my dad, they're in Florida. My sister as well, although she's finding new, she's gonna move to California. Well, but they're in the States. A lot of my uncles and the cousins that I was brought up with, again, the stereotype of like Hispanic families having like the cousin of the cousin and the uncle of the uncle. That's kind of true. At least Venezuela is my family. So you have a bunch of family. They're all across the world. Some people are in Colombia. Some people are in Chile. Some people are in Peru. Some people are in Canada. Some people are in Spain. A lot of my friends from high school. I only have one left back home, back in Venezuela. All of the other ones are like across the world, right? And the thing that when I talk to my uncles and my aunts or my grandparents, my grandmother, both my grandmothers, and they're not able to be with their loved ones, that fills me with more emphasis, like trying to make things right back home, because that happens a lot. My granddad, very carefully, I couldn't see him. When he died, I was here and couldn't go back. And those type of stories happen to all Venezuelans in the country and also outside the country, outside Venezuela. And a lot of them are outside. Most of them are outside Venezuela, and that feels that. I think whenever I talk to them, it's like, look what they took away from us.
Yeah. Wow. Well, Daniel, thanks for joining us. I appreciate you coming on and telling your story. And it just reminds us as Americans how precious all of this is and how much we really do take it for granted. So thanks for being with us.
No, thanks a lot, Jeff. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Okay. Well, listen, go out there. Remember how precious it is, as Daniel described. I mean, can you imagine being 14 years old, 15 years old, going to protests because you feel that your freedom, your liberty is being threatened? I mean, that's just something we don't do generally in the United States because, we have that here. And we again, take it for granted. Go out there, defend liberty and freedom. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for listening to American Potential. You may listen to more stories from Americans working every day to expand freedom and opportunity in their communities by visiting AmericanPotential.com.